Alrighty, guys, let's continue on with our Stage 29 Cambridge Latin translations. So, this is the first part of Arcus Titi 1. So, I've broken this into two sections, hopefully to cut down on the length of these videos. So, let's jump into it. Postridie mane enginsrao manorum multitudo ad arcum Titi undique conveniebat. So, we've got postridie and mane. Both are adverbial. But both also come from ablative forms of locations and time. So on the next day, in the morning, postridie is on the next day, mane is in the morning, engens multitudo Romanorum, so a huge multitude. So engens is modifying multitudo, and splitting those two is Romanorum. So this is, it's a genitive of description, a huge crowd of Romans. A huge crowd of Romans. Conveniebat, so was gathering, so imperfect tense verb. Ad arcum Titi, so at the arch of Titus, undique, from all sides. So undique is an adverb right there. So engens obviously modifying multitudo. Multitudo is the nominative subject of conveniebat. Yeah, so putting it all together, now the next day in the morning, a huge crowd of Romans was gathering at the arch of Titus from everywhere. Dies festus ab omnibus quibus celebrabatur. So dies festus, nominative subject, so the feast day, celebrabatur, imperfect passive voice verb. So the feast day was being celebrated, and then ablative of agent introduced by ob, by omnibus quibus, by all the citizens. Putting it all together, the feast day was being celebrated by all the citizens. So far, so good. Imperator Domitianus eo die fratri Tito arcum dedicaturus erat. So, Imperator Domitianus is the subject, erat is the main verb. So Emperor Domitian, on that day, eo, die, on that day, erat was, and then here's the kicker. We have this dedicaturus. This is a future active participle. You haven't been officially introduced to these, but we've seen them a bunch of times throughout this course. You translate future active participles as about to or going to. And you can tell them because they have this urus in it. Matter of fact, the word future in English is the future active participle of sum, futurus. So about to be in that sense. So dedicaturus means about to dedicate. So Imperator Domitianus, Emperor Domitian, was about to dedicate. And what was he about to dedicate? The arcum, so the arch, to, so this is a dative of interest, to Titus, and in apposition to that is fratri, to the brother Titus, to his brother Titus. So Tito is not modifying fratri. They're actually in apposition to each other. So to Titus, his brother, and then AODA is, again, locative in time on that day. So putting it all together, Emperor Domitian on that day was about to dedicate the arch to his brother Titus. Iusu imperatorus, so ablative of instrument with a genitive. So by order of the emperor, pompa magnifica, a splendid parade. Ducebatur, main verb, again, passive voice, imperfect tense, was being led per urbem totam, through the whole city. Once again, we see that the preposition right there is splitting the adjective from the noun that it's modifying. So, putting it all together, by order of the emperor, a huge parade was being led through the whole city. Next sentence. Multi-celli, so these are nominative first declension plurals. They are not genitives. Many seats, so a cella is a seat. Ponebantur, another imperfect tense, passive voice verb. Many seats were being placed prope arcum, near the arch, and then an ablative of agent by sotuis, by the slaves. So putting it all together, many seats were being placed by slaves near the arch. Iluk. Now, iluk is from the illa lud, but it's an adverb. It means there or in that place. So there, in that place, multi senatores, this is our nominative subject, many senators, spe favoris Domitiani, and then this is really in or with the hope, objective genitive, of the favor of Domitian. So Domitiani is another possessive genitive, so it's genitive. So Domitian, it's his favor, and they have the hope of that favor. So this is hard to translate into English. Literally, it means by or in the hope of the favor of Domitian. But we would probably translate it with another verbal form there to make it sound more fluid in English. So, for example, the hope of gaining that favor. We've seen this, I think, in a previous translation. So the best way to translate this is many senators in the hope of gaining Domitian's favor were gathering, conveniebant, imperfect verb, iluk, there. So I'm going to put it all together again. Many senators were gathering there in the hope of gaining Domitian's favor. Next sentence. Inter eos, among those guys, specifically eos is aiming back at senators, I would say. Among those guys, Salvius, gerens togam splendidam, wearing a magnificent toga. So gerens is a present active participle. Gero means to bear, but you bear clothes, so you use it as wearing. So among them, Salvius, wearing a splendid toga, quaerebat, imperfect verb, was looking for a locum, a place, and then ubi. Right here, this is one of the purpose clauses that they introduce in this chapter. And he was looking for a place where asset, and that's why we have this subjunctive verb, where he might, and then conspicuous, where he might be conspicuous. We have the word in English, but I think that it's glossed something like where he might be more easily seen. We get the spic part in there is from specto, to watch. So putting it all together, among them, Salvius, wearing a magnificent toga, was looking for a place where he might be easily seen. Next sentence. Inter equites, so among the knights. So the equites is a social class in Rome. The equites are extremely wealthy compared to the average run-of-the-mill person, but they are at a lower social class level than the senators. So among the knights, and then relative clause describing the equites, the knights who, stavant, imperfect tense verb, were standing, post, behind the accusative going with post, behind the senators, aderat hateres ipse. So the main verb of this main clause is aderat hateres, the subject, and ipse is an intensifying pronoun modifying hateres. Hateres himself was present. Imperfect tense verb. So putting it all together, among the knights who were standing behind the senators, Haterius himself was present. All right. Favorem imperatoris avide sperabant. So he was hoping, imperfect tense verb, Awide, this is an adverb, probably from an ablative form with that long E right there. So he was hoping eagerly for the favorem, for the favor, imperatoris, genitive right here of the emperor, possessive genitive. So he was eagerly hoping for the emperor's favor. At, so this is another main clause that is joined. It's conjoined with at. And this is actually quite a difficult sentence right here. It has a couple of little nuances to it. Et in animo voluebat. So this is an idiom in Latin. So volvo is to like turn around, to rotate, and then in animo. So he was turning, perfect tense verb, in animo, so in his animus. Now this goes into the two things that the Romans had. They had an animus, sort of like a spirit, and an animus, which is sort of like a mind. Jung, the early psychologist, separated these two in his psychology too, the animus and the anima. So he was turning around in his mind. This means he was considering. So if you are turning something around in your mind, you're thinking about it. So, and voluebat in animo, we'll just translate that as he was wondering, or he was thinking, considering. And what was he considering? Quando is subordinating this next bit. When. And then the main verb that goes in this subordinated little clause here is esset. Another purpose clause is what they're trying to write as a purpose clause being subordinated by quando, in the same way that we saw one a little bit earlier. When he might, and then they threw in another future active participle here, accepturos, and we know that acipio is to receive. And with that future active ending, it's going to receive or about to receive. So the best way to put this together is when he might be going to receive. The premium, the reward, promissum, promised to him, having been promised to him. And then, so this is a perfect passive participle. And we know that since it's perfect and passive, it is going to take this ablative of agent, having been promised, and probably put in brackets, to him, a Salvio, by Salvius. This is quite a complex sentence for this level of Latin, but we got through it together. So let me put it all together for you so that it is a little bit easier. And I'll start back at Pavorum. So he was hoping eagerly for the emperor's favor, and he was considering when he might be going to receive the reward promised by Salvius. Next sentence. Ara engens, a huge altar. This is the subject. And then we have a participial phrase modifying it. So exstructa, having been constructed, having been built, pro arcu. So pro is a preposition and it takes an ablative. Having been built in front of the arch. Passive tense verb, main verb of this sentence, was being decorated. Floribus, with flowers, so that's an instrumental ablative. And then a sorvis, ablative of agent. So by slaves. So let's put that all together. A huge altar, having been built in front of the arch, was being decorated by slaves with flowers. Circum aram stabant vigenti sacerdotes. So around the altar, so this is a prepositional phrase, circum takes an accusative, around the altar was standing 20 priests. So vigenti is modified sacerdotes. In more natural English word order, you should say 20 priests were standing around the altar. Aderant quoque haruspices, qui exta victimarum inspicerent. So, aderant is our main verb. It's coming first in the sentence. It is an imperfect plural. So, haruspices is the subject. So, soothsayers or augurs, haruspex, were also quoque present. And then we have a relative clause. Well, there's two ways to look at this. It's in this stage, in stage 29, it calls this a purpose clause. It's saying that they're present to do this thing. But the other way of looking at it, and a lot of grammars will show you this, this is what's called a relative clause of characteristic. Now, the reason it's a relative clause of characteristic as opposed to an ordinary relative clause is that the verb is in the imperfect subjunctive. This is also the reason that stage 29 calls this a purpose clause, because it's in subjunctive and they're trying to lump it in with other subordinated clauses. Either way, it translates the same. Just know that it can be considered either a purpose clause or a relative clause of characteristic. So, who inspicerent, who might inspect, or who were there to inspect, is essentially what's getting what it's trying to say, or who inspected the exta, the guts, the entrails, the bowels, victimarum, of the victims, of the sacrifices. So remember that a haruspices opens up a sacrificial animal and looks at their guts to make sure that there's nothing wrong with them, and if there's some sort of strange thing about it, then they use it to predict the future. So let me put it all together for you. So soothsayers were also present who inspected the victims' entrails or bowels. Interia, so this is an adverb, but it's really look at it. It's inter plus ea, between these things. But it's translated not as between these things, but actually as in meanwhile. Meanwhile, pompa lente per viam sacram ducebatur. Meanwhile, the procession, the parade, was being led, imperfect tense, passive voice, lente, slowly, so adverb, but ablative in form, in a slow manner. Per, so preposition plus accusative extent, through the via sacra, the sacred street. Altogether, in the meanwhile, the parade was being led slowly through the via sacra. Prima in parte, so prima is actually modifying parte. It's separated by the preposition in the first part. So this means in the forefront. Tubic ines. So this is the nominative subject, the trumpeters. In kerebant, were marching, imperfect tense verb, in flantes tubas. So this is a participial phrase, present active participle, modifying tubic ines. It means blowing the tubas, so sounding the tubas, the horns or trumpets. So let's put it all together. In the first parts, in the forefront, trumpeters were marching, sounding their horns. You have to put it there in brackets if you put it in there. All right, guys. Next video, we'll finish off the Arcus Titi Part 1, and then the last translation for the stage will be Arcus Titi Part 2. All right, guys. If you have any questions, as always, just email me about them. Thank you.